Welcome back to the Unique Boutique. I'm your host, Matt Hodkinson. Now, we all know we're supposed to have case studies. Most of us have a handful sitting on our website, quietly doing very little. My guest today thinks that's a tragedy and a wasted revenue opportunity as well. Sue Rizzello has spent 35 years in B2B marketing and runs Remedy Marketing, now in its 20th year. Her specialism is proof, using customer case studies and thought leadership to make boutique firms the credible choice, not just the louder one. In this conversation, we get into why proof is differentiation, the pitfalls that make most case studies dull, how to build stories that keep paying out for years, and where thought leadership is heading in an AI-flooded world. There's a lot here that you can act on today, so let's get into it. Sue Rizzello, welcome to the Unique Boutique. How are you today?
I'm well, Matt. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Great to have you. Listen, we connected on the basis that, of course, I'm speaking on these podcasts about differentiation, standing out, and you've got a unique angle on this because you speak from a place where you're using case studies and social proof to differentiate your clients in the B2B space. So I'm keen to dive into that. But first off, give us your very own sort of introduction of who you are and all about Remedy.
Okay, well, I'm Sue Rizzello. I've been knocking around in marketing for a good 35 years yet now, so been around for quite a long time. As an agency, after being in corporate for a bit, I started up 20 years ago, and we've survived 20 years, so that's not too bad. We're B2B tech and services based primarily. That's what I've always done. And our area of specialism within demand generation is really focused on customer voice through case studies and getting insights out through thought leadership, content and campaigns, that sort of thing.
Wonderful. I know that you kind of started out as a traditional PR firm, didn't you? So what made you set up in the first place? Because as you said, you've been in the game for sort of 35 years. What kind of motivated you to start an agency in the first place?
Well, it goes back to the fact that I came into agency life very, very early on. So my first sort of, let's call it proper job, was as an account exec in a small tech PR agency. So tech was my original home. PR was my original home. And I loved being in PR for several years after that, for a long time. It was when I went into a corporate role, I went in as corporate comms lead, but then I became the EMEA marketing director over time, and it kind of broadened my horizons. And what happened as a result of that was I started to view marketing more widely, but I still see it through a communications-centric lens. So I'm always going back to those sort of PR roots about how different stakeholders see you and so that sort of thing. Yeah. When I started an agency, it was actually on the back of a so-so experience in corporate, having a lot of agencies working for me at the time of different types and different sizes, some with very large sort of EMEA accounts, including PR agencies, but also all sorts of others as well. Didn't have a great experience as the client. And when I came out, and I did a bit of a sidestep into art for a couple of years, but when I started the agency, I thought, I don't want to run an agency like the agencies that used to work for me, because they didn't really make my life easier. They needed too much from me in order to do their job. They fell into, I think, what is a classic trap for all of us of reporting the activity you do more than the outcomes you create and the value you create. And so when I started up, I thought, I don't want to do that anymore, so we'll do it differently. I started it as a PR and marketing agency, therefore, not just pure PR. So very much marketing from a PR perspective from day one. Over the last 20 years, PR has receded somewhat. We still do bits and pieces of PR work, but it always tends to be around case studies and thought leadership, both of which are very attractive to media. But of course, they're also powering all sorts of other marketing communications and campaigns as well.
So I do want to touch on that part, because I know that a lot of listeners, and I speak to consultancy leaders most days of the week, and that story of having worked with an agency and gotten results that we're a bit meh at best, is rife out there. And that's the experience of a great many boutique consultancy leaders. Why do you think there is that level of failure? Is it very early on in the expectation setting? As you said, they're reporting on activity rather than the results. And therefore, I feel like there's there's an at odds kind of dynamic going on there. Or is there more to it? I mean, how should we be approaching these relationships with agencies?
I'm not sure it actually is sort of about the agencies within themselves. I think there is a mismatch of business model and culture between clients and their agencies and their clients, though, because agencies sort of by their nature tend to rest on managing a delivery margin, juggling resources, based, unfortunately, on time, even though we do our very best and everybody tries to escape from either measuring or reporting against use of time. Unfortunately, clients often see it as the only way that they can comprehend what an agency does. Clients are working in a very, very different world where value to them doesn't mean activity, it means results. Yeah. And somehow you've got to sort of cross the divide between them. But agency reporting, particularly into corporate organisations, which was my experience, tends to almost have to justify its existence, because otherwise you end up at the end of a budget cycle with people going, well, and what did that agency really do? Really deliver? Many aspects of marketing, it's been improved, sort of 100-fold over the past sort of 15 years, certainly the last few years, because so much of what we do is measurable. Yeah. Things are connected over the long term. The results that you get can be viewed in the long term through complex marketing programs that I won't mention. But it's still, we end up defaulting back to, look, Ma, look what I did. Yes. It's a default setting. It's not a good one.
No. And that's certainly been my experience as well, because my whole business here at Tilt originally came out of my agency that I was running, an inbound marketing agency for 11 years. And the realization that, again, much like yourself, we refused to be like other agencies. We wanted to make ourselves redundant over time and give the skills to the clients. I think that's another important factor, that clients should be inheriting those skills and strategies. And the other thing I think that denotes a successful consultancy agency, whatever flavor you want to give it, is that specificity of value proposition. And you've landed on this idea of social proof and case study marketing, as you call it. What talks about that realization for you? How did you arrive at that conclusion? What was the big aha moment, if there was one?
It wasn't a big aha moment, because it was growing for many years. Case studies are one of those things that are ubiquitous across, certainly in B2B. And so I remember starting doing case studies, creating case studies for clients, 30 odd years ago when I started out. But they had a very narrow sort of definition. The more I did of them, and I must have done hundreds by now, the more I saw that clients who really embraced the idea of building a full case study program got exponentially more business value from them. And I mean, not just creating case studies in order to create some press coverage, or and these days in order to just create content for the website or the social feeds. They were creating it with revenue in mind, with commercial use in mind. They were factoring in what kind of case studies their sales guys would actually benefit from. They were taking a much more strategic view of it. And I actually learned a lot from one particular client that I worked with in construction for 14 years. We did probably 55 case studies for them, interviewing huge construction and engineering companies. And I developed in the process a kind of framework of what I considered to be a good case study versus so case study, in order to generate those kinds of commercial results. In the end, after 14 years, the the company regularly told me these are the best single lead generator that we have is our case studies. They acted as a draw on the website. They acted as the most powerful tool, but they really used them. And this was the difference. They didn't treat them as pieces of marketing copy only. They took them out on the road. They used them as the basis of more advanced customer partnering and advocacy type thinking. And it just made me think case studies are so valuable that people waste them at their peril. And when you look at agencies, they are the worst at this actually, because we have a tendency to show and tell. You know, show lots of pictures of what we did and report very proudly about the achievements. And sometimes the customers don't get asked. You know, the clients never ask. Not everybody, and more and more video case studies have kind of become the norm. You can't kind of do that without the customer and the client being involved. So the clients are becoming more involved in those, and yet in the process, they're capturing thinner and thinner and thinner stories. Because editorial stories, where it all started, they're the ones that capture the real depth and length and arc of a story of a relationship with a client, whereas the video sort of testimonial case study kind of thing doesn't. It captures a very thin cursory one, so you need it all. So I created a kind of framework that integrates all the thinking across the different types of content, different media.
Let's come back to that framework. I'd love to hear more about that, Sue. But you touched on something there around case studies being a fantastic lead generator for some of your clients. And I think we've got this, especially those in marketing. In fact, we're all told that case studies are a great sort of lower funnel activity. It's kind of, and for those who, you know, funnels are everywhere, I know, but for those who aren't aware, that kind of latter stage kind of conversation, it might be an objection handler even, it might be used to ratify a decision from a would-be client who is otherwise convinced but just needs something to get them over the line. You're intimating there that there's something to be said for using that social proof very early on in the relationship, right?
Absolutely, every stage. So you're right. Case studies are often, and customer proof in general, often used that, you know, they pull together a battle card with, here's how to overcome this objection. And it, as said in this case study, this customer said that, this customer proof overcomes this objection. So they definitely can. They are really useful for that bottom of funnel, the conversion step, the objection handling, that last bit of doubt, banishing that last piece of doubt in a buyer's mind. But actually, if you create a rich enough base in terms of a story at the start, you can slice it and dice it and tell the story in different levels of depth and in different ways and across different media at every single step of the sales funnel. So if you see the world in a linear sales funnel, top, middle, bottom view of the world, why is it that a case study couldn't be part of your attracting people into a funnel in the first place? If you put out the right amount of information, if you put, the logo, an amazing quote, a data point that just says, wow, those can absolutely drag people into the top of the funnel. They can be used in different ways at every stage. We often use case studies as email assets, for example. They're very powerful email assets because as people are going through that process of learning that little bit more about you, and they're being led through this process of, okay, and if you did approach this problem, you can clearly do it. How would you do that? Then you've got examples to show them. So it works at every stage. It's just a question of how you present it, how you treat it. If you see the world in the HubSpot wheel sort of view of which is driven by customer delight, a case study is your story of customer delight. It is quite literally the thing that powers that flywheel. And again, in different ways at different stages, but it's there. It's almost baked into the model.
Amazing. I think there's also something to be said about those case studies representing the kinds of companies you want to attract in the future. I know that the relevance can really make or break that, whether that conversation is going to go further. I worked with a client once who was pivoting slightly in their consultancy, was looking to work with smaller businesses, SMEs, you might say. And yet their website and all the social proof they were putting out to the world, they had logos like BMW and Vodafone and IBM. And you're just thinking, well, as soon as I see those logos, first off, I'm saying that's not for me. I'm not the big household name. I'm not that big brand. And also you get this connotation even that perhaps they're more expensive than you can really sort of work with. So that idea of niching, knowing your audience, and I know that you've said, of course, at the top of this interview that you work with B2B tech and service-based businesses. How did you arrive at that decision to niche, Sue? Was that driven by your proposition and you recognize that case studies and case study marketing suited that audience, or was it vice versa? How did that work?
It's partly, I guess, because it is ubiquitous. So literally every time we spoke to any tech company or any service companies, case studies, stories, logos, they are always a critical part of their sales and value proposition. So they're always there. But the reason we've ended up specializing more and more in it is more because I developed more and more and more depth in the framework. So like any other agency, you're focused on those little bits of IP that you can actually create for yourselves. And this framework became incredibly rich. I mean, we have a sort of cascade ROI model that, sort of it just became something that was so obvious to me that it slid into the center of what we do. And actually it was very similar with thought leadership because it has a number of very similar attributes in that it is one of the only ways that commoditized businesses or businesses in hugely competitive and noisy marketplaces can stand out. It's either the quality of the work they do, if they can make it visible, or the quality of the insight and the understanding and the commitment they have to particular sectors. Those are the things that make people stand out. So making this our kind of mission in life to be about helping people prove what makes themselves unique and different, it was a natural marriage to settle on those two main pillars. And then when we do general marketing services, it's always powered by thought leadership or by case study type content.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I know that, so I wanted to kind of lead the conversation towards your framework. And I guess the first part of that is, as you mentioned, you've got to open up clients to be part of that conversation in the first place. I think I'd admit that the vast majority of the consultancies that I speak with haven't, and they would admit this, haven't been fantastic at going back to clients that they've worked with in the recent past, capturing the true impact of the work that they've done. They might capture the odd testimonial and review, but not go back and really say, look, what needles have we moved? To what degree? What the quantifiable result of what we've done? So you can tell a true case study story about that. The question is, how do you open up a client to having that conversation? Because inevitably that feels a bit me. It's kind of, we've done this work and you paid us handsomely, by the way, as well. And now I want more. I want to capture that story. I want to tell the world. How do you approach that?
Okay, honestly, I always talk about choice as being the first and most important step. So we created the framework I alluded to a couple of times called the proof to revenue framework. And the first and most critical step in that is actually choosing the right customer. So you talked about the need to tell the stories which are representative of your target buyers, and I couldn't agree more, because you're trying to create that resonance of, hey, they get me, right? They understand my problem, or they understand my world, or they understand, or they've achieved, sort of results that I want from my competitors, that sort of thing. So part of it is choosing the right person. The second one is just approaching them in the right way, because you said me. It's not about me. Or I do say a lot to clients, it's not about you, stupid. It's about them. It's about your client, or it's about your customer. And if you approach a case study as a favor, I want you to help me, to endorse me, you are instantly depressing the chances of them wanting, because they have a choice. They are actually wanting to get involved. If you can present it, on the other hand, as this is about you telling your story, this is about you showing how you solved your problem. Yes, you made a brilliant choice in choosing us to do it. If you make them look good and present it as a win-win proposition, A, they're much more likely to say yes. And secondly, they're much more likely to be expansive in interview and champion it within their own organization. And when you're doing case studies with large organizations, your case study candidate absolutely has to look like a good corporate citizen.
Mm.
And so you must also have an eye to the wider brand that's behind them. So we, for example, we always look and ask very carefully about what are the messages that that organization are wanting to put out right now? How can we align with that and make sure that, what we're doing is going to be as in close alignment with them enough not to divert the case study, but so that it's seen as a good, positive piece of corporate material for them now. Because if you get that right, they'll share your case study for you.
Mm.
It's a bit like doing joint award entries with clients. As long as everybody's sharing the limelight, everybody will shout about it. And case studies are actually no different.
Yeah, that's a really good example, a good analogy. So, Sue, without giving away all of your IP, I'd like to kind of tell the listeners a bit about that framework and how do you advocate that people in the kind of consultancy network, how do they start to think about approaching this? So they've identified a great client who represents those that they want more of. How do they then take that forward and produce something that's going to take them towards that commercial result that you speak of?
Well, there are steps. And our framework goes through them. It doesn't actually give away all of what we do, but set out with the right end in mind is the first thing. Having decided who you're going to approach, is set out with the right view. Set out with a view that you're trying to create something that's a business tool and a business asset for yourself. It's not a piece of sales or marketing material. It's not a blog for the website. It's not just a web page. It's not just a social post. Sometimes, people just think about that. You've got to set out with a kind of commercial view in mind. You then need to capture things in the right depth, which is why it goes back to my ongoing conviction that the editorial case study is king. Now, not everybody wants to read long case studies anymore. They don't always want to read, so huge documents. That doesn't mean you shouldn't capture it all. You don't have to ever publish the long one if you've got that amazing base of the full story. Although actually people do, at the right stage, right at the end, people do read long case studies. So choose the right people, capture the right level of content, and then and have a plan of what you're going to do with it. Because if your thinking only goes as far as, well, and we'll get it on the website and we'll do a LinkedIn post, that's not going to work very hard with you. The phrase I always use is case studies are gifts that keep on giving, because if you play them right, if you create good things and then you manage them, you can carry on getting value out of them for years, literally years. The construction company I worked with for 14 years, and that ended about 10 years ago. They're still using some of the case studies that we wrote for them now. And that's not the only example that I've seen. They really endure.
Yeah, yeah.
Plan ahead and then, plan how you're going to cascade it out, through your sales process, involve people.
Yeah.
But agencies, boutiques especially, we're actually quite good at being proud of what we've done. We don't always apply the same rigor as we do with the kind of work that we do with our clients, and it's the cobbler's shoes, cobbler's children problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I do recognise that, and you said earlier, there's a lot of wastage, when it comes to case studies, social proof. What does that wastage look like? I mean, how do you kind of get it wrong? What are some of the pitfalls when somebody is, clearly doing it wrong? They've gone down the wrong route. They've captured the wrong story. They're using it the wrong way. What are some of the pitfalls to look out for?
There are a lot of sort of redundant loops I see with case studies, and we analyze a lot of people's case studies on a continual basis to see what people are doing. The biggest pitfall of all is what I call the problem solution benefit framework. So I don't know where it came from, but years ago, somebody decided that the way to do it is first to lay out the problem or the challenge. Then you say, well, this is what we did. This is the solution we came up with. And then we, look what we did at the end. Look at the result. And that's fine, but it's boring. It's dull. It has no story. Even if you pop the odd testimonial quote in among there, it's still dull. It's still boring. It's still not a story. So that's the biggest pitfall. And I see agencies do this all the time. They think it's the right way to do it, so they do it that way. Many because they're spending all their time and energy working on the client business. So the agency stuff, the in-house stuff, gets left behind. The second thing is, and I see this with creative agencies a lot, is that they are so fixated on the visuals or the imagery that they've created, that they think that alone is enough to sell what they can do. And they never tell the story. So they never talk and they never ask the client about the experience they had, because the client experience is the biggest differentiator. It's not the service. It's very rarely the product that is the thing that stands out for clients and customers. It's the experience they had, which is why when we do case study interviews, we don't have a set list of questions for a start. We have a story arc model that we use, but we're always asking about the anecdotes. So we get our clients to tell us what are the anecdotes you want the client to remember, your customer to remember. The time when you stayed up until midnight or that went in on a Sunday or went above and beyond or whatever, because prompted well, the case study interviewee will happily tell those anecdotes because they find them much easier to tell than the business stories. And that's the gold. You get them to remember and state and just say, these guys saved our life when they did this. That's what people remember and resonate with.
Well, that's some of the advice I've received over the years, is that a great case study should contain a couple of things. One is that real sort of, how did it affect the person that you worked with? What was the, I know we overuse this term in marketing, what's keeping you up at night? And it's kind of like, what puts you to sleep, for a restful night's sleep?
Yeah.
And the other is, of course, something that moves the needle, that commercial result that you speak of, the true impact of the work. So moving away from what you just described as that more capabilities-led positioning to one that is truly about the impact and the change that you're instilling. Would you advocate that? Is it as simple as it's just a number, a feeling? Is there more to the perfect case study?
I think the perfect case study, if such a thing exists, has all of these things. So the other extreme we see is people thinking the data does all the telling for them. So they go purely to the commercial, right? And lead gen agencies, digital marketing agencies fall into this trap all the time. That they just talk about the data and they forget the experience. So I think it doesn't matter which bits you have, it has to be knitted together by the experience. There is no cookie cutter case study shape. I think if there's one thing I've learned, in the hundreds, case studies, is that each one has a unique shape, but they all have a shape. But you don't know what that shape is going into it. And the people who have done the work are often the worst people to even allow that shape to emerge. So doing your own case studies. I know, yes, I would say that because I do case studies, but I'm not alone in doing that. Copywriters left, right and centre will do case studies for you. They're much better able to do it than you are. Because you go into it with a shape in your mind. You constrain the story, you constrain the client, you ask them the wrong questions, you don't just let them talk, and you end up with something that's sort of subpar.
Yeah, you can miss the real value, can't you, if you don't give that rope to the client to speak. I want to talk about the volume of of social proof as well, because I mean, you spoke about the longevity of some of those case studies, and I'd advocate that. I mean, they can last for many years in some cases, so long as the relevance of result and solution is still there, and the obviously the client hopefully is still knocking around as well. That always helps. But is there a sweet spot? I mean, first off, is there a minimum amount of social proof and case studies that you would advocate getting to, and can you have too much?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure no, I'm not sure there's an ideal amount. There are different types of social proof. So I've talked many times about social proof pyramid. So at the bottom, social proof that comes from social media engagement, likes, follows, comments. You get an awful lot of that. Each individual item is of relatively low value, but the value is in the mass. As you go further up, things like reviews and testimonials and Trustpilot ratings and things like that, you get fewer of those, but they are disproportionately more valuable. Then you move up to things like customer testimonials. So when people are, and I would include video testimonials there, you get fewer still of those, but oh my goodness, they are much more powerful because they are starting to use the customer voice, but they are still tend to be limited. You can't tell a full story. You never get the full story. You never get the full emotion coming out in testimonials. You get a line on it maybe. And then case studies are at the top of the pyramid. You have far fewer of them. Sometimes you only need one or two or three because they are so much more powerful. They are so much more rounded. They can be turned into so many more things that they are disproportionately valuable as business assets compared to all other forms of social proof.
And would you advocate, as I've advised many clients over the years, if you start with video, the repurposing of that content becomes much easier. You've got the audio track, you've got transcripts that you can then spin off into various sound bites and even infographics from what's been said. And is that the way to go about capturing? Is it video first always and where possible, or is there another way to approach this?
I think you can start in either place. So I always used to say you must start in an editor, with an editorial capture. And the reason for that is that you capture a lot more, which means you can turn it into more things. From text, you can create video and audio and infographic and all of the forms that you mentioned. And it is significantly cheaper as a starting point relative to video, with fewer of the limitations of repurposing video. However, video, because it is becoming more and more the chosen point of entry for people, and it is becoming more and more valuable on social media. LinkedIn is defaulting to video. Its creator program is coming along, and that's going to be very much B2B video centric. I think video is now an inevitable entry point for many companies. But the thing is, you should be thinking, if you start from that, but you think also you can capture your editorial content at the same time as doing the video, then we're talking, right? You can absolutely do both. But you're right, because the secret is in that repurposing. It's so I said slice and dice, and it is a tremendously rich base. Any case study in any format, as it should be, a tremendously rich base for creating content in every single media format that exists, and in multiples of each one, and in combination and recombination. Because as soon as you've got 3 case studies, imagine what you can do with those. We did.
Absolutely.
It's so yes, I wouldn't say it's always the point to start now, video, but I think increasingly it is going to be the place to start regardless.
I want to come back to the whole sort of revenue angle as well, because and amongst all of that, Sue, you implied that there's a certain amount of attribution that's possible here, that you can actually measure the impact of those case studies on commercial wins, on new revenue, and what have you. Are there any sort of tips or remedies around how to tell whether a case study is whether you're sweating the equity, I guess, whether you're getting the commercial benefit from them?
There are some models emerging that sort of suggest that you could attribute a certain amount, sort of 5% of a win, track it back to case studies. But I think it's the practical problem of all forms of content attribution, in that everything has to be published in a way that can be tracked in order to get any kind of dependable view at the end of the chain. So its attribution has always been difficult. It's always been anecdotal. I'm not sure it's come on hugely, other than the ability, to track and manage content marketing. You sort of manage views, watch views. You watch their contribution. You see how they funnel into the sales funnel. But I don't think there's a magic answer there. Unfortunately, wish there was.
Well, let's talk about we've talked about case studies a hell of a lot there. It's been hugely valuable. What about thought leadership? You've mentioned that too, and the fact that it does go hand in hand with that social proof aspect too. I want to talk about where that's going more so than where we've been. I feel like everybody's been told they need to be a content creator, they need to be a thought leader, and it can be difficult to, of course, get leadership teams involved in all of that. So people are turning to AI. People are turning to new ways to create that thought leadership content in more sustainable ways where they can remain consistent. But to your mind, if you do really want to stand out, if you want to be noticed with your thought leadership content, with your social proof, what's around the corner? Where should people be looking if they really do want to stand apart from the crowd that, let's face it, are creating content and oodles of it on the likes of LinkedIn and via email and all the other channels as well?
I think that people are going to have to find and get comfortable with a balance of using AI versus still having to use real input, real brain power, real ideas, fresh evidence. Because the challenge with AI, I love AI. It's immense fun. It's an incredibly powerful tool for expanding on things you have, but it's not a great tool for originating. So thought leadership has to be based on something real. Otherwise, most thought leadership is not thought leadership at all. It's just content. They're just articles. Real thought leadership is based on something unique, something either that's original, based on your opinion, your experience, your knowledge, some new evidence that you've created. This is why research-based thought leadership is so much the center of, let's call it, corporate thought leadership, big reports, because they're generating data. It cannot be confused with anybody else's. You look at the big four consultancies, they are the past masters at doing thought leadership, but they have engines for generating massive amounts of research. So do analyst firms. This is why they win on this stuff. This is why they are the ones that are cited everywhere. But any company can originate thought, but they've got to really be careful about where they choose to stand. Because if you want to do, I'm going to be a thought leader in AI, for example, that's going to be hugely difficult to find a fresh, unique angle on an AI topic at a time when everybody's talking about AI.
Yeah.
Are you crazy? You've got to find a different perspective in order to do that. There is a model that an FT thought leadership organization came up with, which is a very simple quadrant that there are 4 quadrants you can stand in. You can go in the tired space, you can go in the sort of mass communication space, you can go in a battle space where everybody is competing for noise on a particular topic, or you can go into a fresh space, knowing that it's not going to get as much attention, but it is genuinely going to be real. And of course, this is where AI search is going to start to tip things, because AI is looking for real sources. When Google's algorithm change kicks in later this year, maybe early next year, to put AI search first, and the traditional list of blue links will disappear. It is going to be looking for authentic sources, citable sources, real voices, quotes from people, original statistics, all the kind of things that actually come from case studies and thought leadership. AI can't generate thought leadership because it's by definition not basing on anything original. It's a synthesis of what it's been trained on. And it can't give your customers the voice. Only they can do it. So it's going to be more and more important that people, sort of do thought leadership. If they're going to do it properly. Otherwise, just admit that what you're doing is just adding volume content. And that's fine. There's room for both. Everybody has to populate their feeds and things, but doesn't make it thought leadership.
Got a couple of important questions before we start to wrap things up, Sue. One is one that I see quite often is when my clients, those working in boutique consultancies, aren't able to talk about particular clients because of confidentiality. Now, my kind of stock answer to that is that some case study is better than nothing. An anonymized one is better than having a logo on it. Would you advocate that? I mean, I know that, of course, it would be great if we could talk about every single client if they were comfortable with that. But what is the acceptable sort of alternative to that situation, do you think?
I think you can do anonymized case studies. Inevitably, not everybody will get agreement to do a case study. My workaround for this often is actually doing an interview-based write-up of an anonymous case study. Is still much more engaging than a flat problem solution benefit write-up, because it removes that partisan perspective and it opens up for the story to be told. You have to, obviously, it is not the customer's voice, but it is a person's voice, somebody who was involved in the project or leading the relationship. It's still a lot more compelling than simply writing up in third party report of what was done. So that to me would work. It works in a tutorial. It would work on video as well. So talking about, this was how we overcame a problem. You make it a problem based video or something. So you can definitely do it. Is it as good? No, it's not. But I would never be afraid to ask. I think you should always ask every customer that wherever you're proud of work, ask them if they would be willing to speak, because it is so surprising sometimes who will actually say yes, including some very large names that you assume would never regard it as an endorsement, but somehow they do it.
Yeah, even when I've seen it, even when it's kind of part of their stock policy, that it's, it's part of the T's and C's when you sign up. Yeah, it's always worth asking the question. And the other question was, I guess, if as many of our listeners will be, I'm sure, in a position where you do think, what my case studies do need a refresh, and also I'm doing all of the things that you said today, Sue, advocate the wrong way to do it. What's the starting point? What can some of our listeners do today to start themselves off on the right path of getting a good bank of case studies they can be proud of and they could eventually be turned into commercial gain?
So there's lots of things that you could do. I mean, simply taking a look at everything that you have and remembering what you have, because a lot of them are buried, or were never fully written up. A lot of the stories of the best things you did were never really written up as case studies. They're on a slide somewhere from, the creds deck from 3 years ago, that sort of thing. So have a really good audit of what you have and what you've done. Be critical about what you have. Just because you have these 4 case studies, are they the best stories for you? Are they actually fitting anything useful? What are you doing now that has never been captured because it's not finished? Because it's not true that you can only do case studies after a project is finished. A lot of people assume it's got to be in the rear view mirror. We've done about 15 interviews for our own clients for case studies. It's pretty much the only marketing we get around to doing for the agency. But often they've been, I've got 4 from clients who are still clients and still very happy because they're still looking backwards. So don't forget, you've got a lot more now than you actually realise. And actually getting them engaged, it's a sort of start of a partnership thinking, which actually can then make your case studies even better later.
Yeah, wonderful. So we've come to that point in the call where I ask Snog, marry, avoid. And of course, it's not the traditional version. A snog
Well,
is a quick win in business. What would you advocate as a quick win that people could avail themselves of this week?
okay. Well, I mean, I think take a fresh look at how you do it using LinkedIn, because people are so wasting what it can do by doing it the lazy way and the easy way, defaulting to AI content and things. One or two original posts this week is going to do you a lot more good long term than any quick and easy AI post. Because don't forget, LinkedIn is for life. It's not just for lunchtime.
Yeah, and we do know that they're cracking down on AI slop as well. So all those telltale signs will be
They are.
outing you as well.
Well, so that's where thought leadership comes in, of course.
Absolutely
I
right.
put out a post today about love your lurkers. It's the gold of LinkedIn is in the long term. So you put out something really smart today. It'll pay you dividends tomorrow.
Wonderful. Talking about the long term, marry is about something you couldn't live without in business that is going to be there for the long term. What would you advocate there?
I think, having said a lot about, sort of not wanting to fall purely into the AI stuff, I think I have to marry Claude.
Yeah.
But it's becoming more and more obvious that, Claude's better looking than the others. He's a bit smarter and, all of those things. But yeah, it couldn't live without it already and will not be living without it, will not be able to live without it in the future. Not to do everything for us, but to power and enable and accelerate everything that we do. It's, yeah, we're hooked for life.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. And avoid is something that people are still perhaps clinging on to, that you think they shouldn't be, that they should ditch from their business. It's not serving them in the way that they think it is.
It's going to sound weird, but their websites. I mean, I think people have a very, very outdated view of what their website can do for them. While I wouldn't say, avoid, i.e., completely ditch your website, I think the old way of websites is going to have to disappear. It's going to have to be seen much more as a, what is this going to do for us in the current business environment and the way that things now work. It's partly search, but it's not only search, because, humans are also using websites in different ways. They're looking for different things. They're going to have to become a kind of trust engine, not a brochure. And I think we've gone hopefully beyond brochure websites in the main, but people still have that brochure-centric view of the website. Yeah. And I think we all fall into that trap. I know I probably do as well.
Completely agree with that. Sue, thank you so much for being with us today. I've learned so much about case studies, about social proof, about the power that they can bring to your business. I think it's definitely something that our listeners can benefit from. So thank you for being with us today on the Unique Boutique.
You're welcome. It's been great fun.